I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
I've seen you perform a lot, and I've always thought each one was hilarious. I've never seen you bomb. The very first time, I thought you were all crowd work, and it was all hilarious. Now I know there's a lot more structure in it, that you have the spine, and the crowd works around it.
Right. Think of it as you're painting a picture, and you have a palette of different colors, right? But those palettes, type of jokes, double entendre, lists, misdirection. But it's also tone is another set of colors. Characters is another set of colors. Crowd work is another set. So there's people who understand comedy on a technical level, and there's people who are just funny individuals. You have to be so equipped with all these micro skills and know which micro skills you got to go to at the moment when and it has to happen instantaneously.
So how do you learn that? Got Dante Nero here. Dante's one of my favorite comedians. Dante, how's it going?
I'm good. I want you to say one of my friends instead.
Yeah. You were at my birthday party.
Absolutely.
You're one of my favorite comedians. I'm going to tell you something that you don't know, actually, about you.
Okay.
So Bill's in the audience here. By the way, we have a new podcast studio. We have an audience. If somebody wants to come and sit in the audience, let me know and whatever. But Bill's sitting in the audience. Bill and I wrote a script for a pilot TV show, which we haven't really showed around yet. And you are actually a character. We even named the character Dante.
Thank you.
And we take dialogue from your actual act and put it in the script. It's hilarious. I'll show you at some point, or
Cool.
the script disappears. But welcome to the show.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me, man.
You've been a comedian for 17 or 18 years.
But going on 18, 17, going on 18.
One of the first times we met, you gave me advice. This was like 6 months ago or so, or more than that. You gave me advice because I was about to go up on stage and I was feeling a little nervous. And you said, don't forget, even if you've just been doing this for 2 years or a year or however long,
Right.
you know 1,000 times more than everyone else in that audience.
Absolutely.
They don't have a right to tell you what's good stand-up comedy or not. You know what's good stand-up comedy
Absolutely.
compared to the audience.
Absolutely.
And that gave me a lot of confidence, and I really have felt a lot of confidence since then every time I go on stage.
Glad, man. I'm glad I could do that. I mean, that's kind of what I do in general, is give advice. I think knowledge is a burden. And when you have that burden, when it comes from a righteous place, you have to get it off. It's a weight that you carry. And you should know that, because you're, with the Bitcoin and all the finances and all your life, you learn things and you need to give it to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I haven't even given your intro enough credit yet. Like, you have a great podcast, the Beige Phillips Show.
Yeah.
Why do you call it the Beige Phillips Show?
Well, it's called the Beige Phillips Show. It's called, now I've changed the name because it's kind of so obscure, but it's called Beige Phillips Presents Man School, hosted by Dante Nero. So, I used to do a radio show with Patrice O'Neal, the great Patrice O'Neal.
Unbelievable comedian, Patrice
Probably
O'Neal.
one of the most prolific comics ever.
And his last special before he passed away, The Elephant in the Room.
Elephant in the Room, amazing. One of some of the most amazing stuff. And him and I, we did a show. We did a show on Sirius Radio called The Black Phillip Show, which was the ghetto Dr. Phil. So instead of Dr. Phil, it was Black Phillip. That's where it came from. And then when he passed away, I picked up the thing, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna call it Beige Phillip because I'm lighter than he is. And it was just kind of an homage to him after he passed away. So,
why are you lighter than his? Why is your mom white or?
No, my mom is she comes from Virginia, the mountains, and they're like descendants of slaves, and she's Monacan Indian, which is a tribe of Sioux, and so my mom is very, very fair.
And what was your dad?
My dad was from Antigua. Well, my grandfather's from Antigua, and my grandmother is actually Irish and black. She was an orphan in Boston, who grew up in an orphanage. So she was very fair as well. Like she was passable white, and we're talking about 1870s. And my dad was born in 1920. Like I was.
Oh, your dad was born in 1920. How many brothers? Do you have a lot of brothers and sisters?
I got 3 older sisters. So I got a sister that's 68. Is my older sister, 67, and I have a sister that's a little older than me by 2 years. So,
and tell me some of the things that you've been on. You've done like a million things, so I'll let you do your credits.
I've done a movie Fighting. I did Blacklist. I'm in the new Ocean's 8 movie with Anne Hathaway. And
oh, you're kidding? I didn't know that.
I got a small part in that. I was actually in John Wick, but I got edited out, so you just see me in the first part. I've done Power on Starz Network, Blacklist on the NBC. What'd
you have the most fun at?
Fringe. Blacklist was fun because I got a chance to do lines with James Spader, which was awesome because I'm always was a fan of his, and just so as a comic, I didn't really ever consider myself an actor until I started doing lines with James Spader. I was like, I guess I'm an actor.
What do you think is, and I want to get to the beginnings of your career as a comedian and your approach to comedy, because I find it to be very fascinating.
Right.
As I mentioned, you're one of my favorites for a very specific reason.
Appreciate that.
No problem. And but what do you see as the difference between acting and comedy?
Comedy, it's all you. It's you and the audience, and it's instantaneously. The gratification from what artistically you put out is right then. You spit it out and you get it back. Acting, you make certain artistic decisions, and then you leave it to the editors enough, and you'll do 12, 20 takes, and then they kind of decide which version of what you did is viable. So
right.
You don't have the same control.
I always ask a lot of actors who have turned into comedians, or I read interviews of comedians who have turned into actors. Mm-hmm. Where what did you enjoy the most? Movies, television, comedy, everybody. And this is not just people I've talked to, but interviews I've listened to, like Jerry Seinfeld, Russell Brand. I spoke to Paul Reiser. Mm-hmm. Everybody always says comedy, stand-up comedy, because that takes you. And you look at Judd Apatow. Judd Apatow's done 100 movies that have been $2 billion of box office. He still just wants to get up and tell jokes to 12 people. He's a stand-up at heart.
Yeah.
So what do you think is that visceral? And I'll tell you, the reason why I'm asking this, I've been doing this for a couple of years, but maybe obsessively a little over a year now, 3 to 6 times a week, which is for me obsessive. And I'm afraid I'm going to be addicted to it for life.
You will. You probably will. It's never, because just when you think you got it, you don't have it. Something smashes you in the head and you go, oh, I guess I don't have it. And there's always different levels to what you're doing. So I forget the book I read, but there was another book about learning, and that there's different stages of learning in that. So initially when you see, like if you go to open mics, there are people who are incompetent and unconscious and incompetent. So they suck and they don't know that they suck, right?
Right.
Then there's conscious incompetence. They suck and they know that they suck. They're aware of it. Then there becomes a point where they're competent and unconscious, where they're things is kind of like the zone, like you're in the zone and you're doing everything right, but you don't really realize it because you're so in the moment. Then there becomes the point where you're competent and conscious, like you know what you're doing and you're aware of it, right? So the growth only happens in the two center categories, which would be competent and unconscious, and unconscious and competent.
So I wanna kind of break those all down, but I'll repeat something you just said in the beginning, which is that just when you think you have it, you don't. Like there was a period about 2 months where I felt like I had a good set of jokes. I felt like I was speaking my truth. I was doing great crowd work, great on stage, and I was just kind of doing either well or killing in every single set. And I even remember walking home one day thinking, I'm doing something wrong because I shouldn't be killing every set at this point. I should be bombing at some point. So I'm probably not taking enough risks. And then I started bombing after that.
Right.
So,
well, the growth happens in those two. So the 2N, which is when you suck and you don't know you suck. There's no growth in that because there's no current location, and if you don't know the current location, you can't get to the destination. You need both. And when you're competent and when you're competent and conscious, you know what you do well and you do it, which makes you complacent, where you're not pushing artistically, you're not pushing yourself to the next level. So those are the two stagnant points. It's when you suck and you know you suck, that forces you to push and take risks because you need to be better. And when you're unconscious and competent, because things start to fall into place almost like muscle memory. And as soon as I get comfortable, then I tend to start pushing myself.
that's the time to take risks.
Otherwise, you spend that time in those areas where you're competent and conscious. You don't. There's no growth in that.
I see that so much. As a I see a lot of sets down here in Stand Up New York. We're a podcasting in Stand Up New York. I own part of the club.
Right.
So I see a ton of sets. I see so many comedians who have been doing it for so many years, and they've done all the TV late night appearances, but they just do. I've been watching them now for over a year. They do the same jokes every time because that's what they know is their level, and they kind of just cap themselves there. That's what will get them on Colbert or Conan or whatever. Right. And I just never see them change. They'll never get their hour on Netflix.
And even if they're changing jokes, a lot of times what they're doing is they're doing stuff in the same context. So what happens is, as much as we as comics manipulate the comics into laughter, the audience manipulates us into a rhythm. So it's Pavlovian. So
and by the way, this is not just for comedy. This is for sales. This is for business. This is for relationships. This is for negotiation. That's why comedy is almost like this visceral initial atom of all these other things that we do in life.
Well, I say this something I say all the time that reminds me of the connections of different mindsets and different skill sets. That true wisdom is the understanding of underlying concepts, how they relate to situations that seem irrelevant but really are not. Meaning, once you have mastered a particular skill, if you boil it down to the root of what those lessons are in that skill, you can reapply those rules in everything in your life.
Absolutely. Like I've noticed this actually on CNBC, the business network.
Yeah.
So I was on a panel with 2 anchors and 3 people, and suddenly I realized what it felt like the comedy muscle clicking in. Now, I wasn't telling any jokes, but I felt myself taking over the panel, including the anchors, like just dominating the discussion, because you learn with crowd work and audience work how nobody in the audience is going to have higher status than you at that moment. Has nothing to do with humor either. It has to do completely with understanding who is in front of you. And control is a bad word. It's more of a conversation.
Well,
but
I don't think control is the bad word. I think manipulation and control they have these negative connotations, but it is manipulation. And what gives you the ability to manipulate is the being present, listening. I think more often than not, we don't listen to things. We don't shut up and just pay attention to what's going on around us, because all of those things, everything that we're listening is information that we're taking in. And if we take it in, like, like my podcast is about relationships. And moreover than not,
And we're going to talk a lot about that in a little bit.
But moreover than not, people are not listening, not genuinely listening. It's funny you talk about acting. What makes an actor authentic is that, okay, I have the lines, but I'm listening to what you're saying so I can respond to it in a real way. So you can connect that to comedy. You see a guy who does he does crowd work. So there's people that do crowd work at people. Like, they'll have a set thing that they're going to say. They know that they manipulate the person and they get them to respond. But the real crowd work is my crowd work is, I'm listening to you, and and I trust that I'm funny enough that the opening will happen. That eventually, if I'm in the backfield and I got the ball, eventually the defenders will open up. And when they open up, that's when I go. But I have to trust myself and trust my ability enough to know that my time is going to come. If I don't believe that, then I'm hasty, and then I just kind of...
Right. So let me see if this puts you into a moment of fear or anxiety. Let's say, and again, by the way, we talk about comedy, but this applies so much to sales, to business, to management, to success in anything, like just breaking down, understanding these components of communication and learning and so on. But let's say you are in front of an audience, you have 10 minutes, say,
right,
and there's only 20 people in the audience, 30, 40, 50, whatever. There is still, what if the audience in that short amount of time doesn't give you anything? Do you have confidence that they always will?
They will.
Mm-hmm.
They always will. You're talking about, so say you have 8 people, right? Say the youngest person, let's say the oldest person in that audience is 20 years old, 25 years old, right? You got 8 people, right? You literally have 200 years of experience in that room.
Yeah.
So in 200 years, nobody has anything to say. Really? I mean, it's almost an impossibility.
So it's interesting. Like, the one time I saw you, there was a woman responding to a lot of your jokes, and suddenly you turned to her and you were like, shut up. I'm not giving a TED Talk here. Like, audience interaction time is over.
Right.
And so, she gave you something because she was responding out of her own experiences.
And you can make that, you can take, you can make, what is Mad Dog says, you make chicken shit and make chicken salad. You can do that. It's always something. They're always going to give you something, because human beings don't have the ability not to. That's
interesting. So so let's take the other extreme then. What if you're only focused on crowd work? It sort of feels like, because it feels like you have and I've talked about this with other comedians, you have to sort of, and this is like sales as well. You're not just going out there and saying in a sales meeting, what problem you have, I'll solve it and charge you.
Right.
You have like a spine, like, I'm offering this service, let's work around that to see what you need.
It's even better. It's like jazz.
Okay.
So there's a framework of a song, but in the framework of that song, you can go in so many different creative situations. But you still stay in the framework of that song that's playing, and then it gives
you're keeping your persona,
Sure.
You're keeping your basic beliefs.
Sure, there's a structure, there's a framework,
And I would say, you mentioned listening also in the context of learning and getting to that next level, but I would add also to that freedom, so that, or not freedom, honesty. So that, you have the honesty to realize, okay, I suck at this, but I'm good at this,
Right.
which is hard for a lot of people to realize.
Sure.
And then an honesty to realize, okay, I might be funny. I might have something interesting to say about this that no one else has said before, but everyone can relate to. So there's certain, honesty, saying what's on your mind and knowing what's on your mind and being comfortable saying it.
Right. This is something that I'm come into, because a lot of younger guys and women listen to my show, but they listen to my show to learn how guys think. But there's a lot of young guys who don't really have they don't have a model. They don't have a role model. There's not a masculine role model. And so I become their masculine role model.
Why do you think a lot of guys don't have role models?
I think there's I don't want to say, because I consider myself a feminist in that I think that women should get equal pay and be able to do the things that they want, and they should be able to choose about their bodies. But I think any one of these movements, any movement becomes it becomes hyperbolic in a sense that it goes far, it's too far at times, which is part of finding that center. The pendulum swings back and forth and then it kind of centers. And so what's happening now is there's a lot of situations where you have because women have been under this toxic masculinity and been disenfranchised, then they've become the tyrants they've become the people that have disenfranchised them. So now you have like the thing that then went down with Aziz Ansari, where he just went out on a date and he's an awkward dude, and then she goes, that becomes the Me Too thing because she had a horrible date with him, but she blew him twice. And so how is this, like, that negates the Harvey Weinstein, that toxic masculinity where somebody is actually taking advantage of you. You just want to jump on that bandwagon. You can't, you have to be, so what we're talking about is credibility and righteousness.
Right. So just on the Aziz thing, it's interesting because regardless of where someone stands on this, there's been a lot of discussion around it.
Right.
Whereas and I think the difference with Harvey Weinstein is, again, there's really been no discussion.
Right.
Like, he molested and possibly raped. Right. Who knows? I don't know. But he's a bad guy. Whereas Aziz, some people say he's bad, he's awful. Some people say that was just a bad date. But there's at least discussion.
Right.
But I think the mistake would be to say Aziz is the same as Harvey Weinstein.
Right. But I think you still have to have the discussion about Harvey Weinstein. So nobody's denying the fact that this guy was a piece of garbage, but is every one of his situations the same? Are they all these kind of situations? And I know I get a lot of flack for this, but it's just the truth. There are definitely women who have put themselves in that position knowing that this was a deal. That I'm basically giving my sexual resources for a deal in the movie industry. And they were totally aware of that. And I don't know who that was or who it wasn't. I can't, I don't know the story, but I'm saying there's an array of different levels of this kind of bad behavior.
Right, but even then, let's say the problem, let's say there are cases like that. The problem is that Harvey Weinstein assumed he can always make a deal.
Right.
And in some cases, he couldn't, but he thought he could, and then went over the line. Whereas Aziz...
He's the dude who went out on a date. In my mind, he's the dude who went out on a date. And not only that, but when the girl said, I thought this was inappropriate, the first thing he did was apologize. So there's for us to think that in order for things to move forward, you're always going to have imperfect allies, but we are all imperfect.
That's interesting. So in order to move forward, what do you mean by imperfect allies?
Okay, so you might have somebody that might have done something inappropriate. So like Morgan Spurlock, the Super Size Me dude. Nobody accused him. He came forward and said, I had done these things and da-da-da-da-da. But then that should have been something where we go, okay, this guy is moving forward to change. Look, as a kid, we would say if somebody did something, we would go, oh, that's gay. And now I don't say that. And I don't say the word faggot and stuff like that during my set because it's inappropriate. But there was a time when I said that. That was, if you look at Eddie Murphy's Raw, he just rips the gay community. But we learn what's better, and we try as we learn more, we are expected to do better. And if we do that, what else could you ask for? are we really asking people to be perfect? Because nobody's perfect. And so you got to have that discussion in order to find where the line is or where the line isn't.
So let's. I want to. How did you? I want to roll back to how did you get into comedy in the first place?
So I went to college at SUNY New Paltz, and I was in a fraternity. I was in a Omega Psi Phi fraternity, a pleasure fraternity, and I was in a kind of a shitty relationship, kind of with an abusive chick, not physically abusive, just emotionally abusive.
I was gonna say physically, you're a big guy. I'm sure you can handle it.
But it was an emotionally abusive, and I realized now that she kind of came from an emotionally and a physically abusive background, and so this is kind of how she communicated. And I pledged the fraternity, and somebody was doing. I always worked out and stuff, and somebody was doing a male review strip show for Toys for Tots, and each Greek fraternity was being represented. And
a strip show for a toy charity.
Yeah, right, exactly. So there was a guy who they had from my fraternity. He backed out last minute. Somebody called me, and I was like, yeah, I'm in, because I'm always kind of down. And I did that, and which started my whole career in male stripping. Right, so I started male stripping, and then when I left school, I actually had a group, and I did, that's what I did for 10 years. And then I've always was somebody I was always fascinated by comedy. I was always a guy who snuck home from school.
Wait. You were a stripper for
10 years.
For 10 years.
Yeah.
And just out of curiosity on the economics of that, what would you make per night?
If I did a private show, I make anywhere from $150 to $250 per show.
What, like a private show? You're at the club and some guy says, "Let's go to the back room" or something, or some girl.
If you had a bachelorette party and I went and did the bachelor party, it would go anywhere from $125 to $250 plus tips.
Plus tips. And was it mostly women?
It was women.
Okay.
Women. And so I was doing that, and so on a weekend, I would do anywhere from 10 to 15 shows on a weekend, right? Which is pretty good money in 1989, 1990,
Yeah.
I was a young kid just running around making it. Plus, you made tips. Anywhere from $50 all the way up to $200, and you can make as much in tips as you did in, and then they had these huge shows that were going on all over New York and up and down the East Coast, like 500, 800 women at a time, and then you would go to those shows and you would perform, and then you would hand out your business card, and that would drum up business.
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Every podcast I do is so personal and special to me. The podcast is all about how people can be better performers, even peak performers at whatever it is they're passionate about. So help people discover this podcast. Help me, help the listeners. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or wherever it is you get your podcasts. You can also check out the show notes at jamesaltucher.com/podcast. And also, if you want to get my blog updates and other updates that I do, sign up for the newsletter at jamesaltucher.com. Once again, thanks so much for joining me on the journey of this podcast. Do you ever feel like because you're stripping in front of 500 women who are presumably enjoying it because they're paying you and giving you their cards afterwards, you're probably getting so much confidence with your clothes off. Did you ever have less confidence with your clothes on, just trying to meet a girl in a party than when your clothes are off?
Well, I knew guys that if they were at a party and it wasn't in the perspective of stripping, if they weren't picking up a girl at the show, because that's your leverage, that's your framing, where it frames your value, they just had no game. But we talk all the time, and I'm very philosophical about it, but I was learning lessons from the things that were happening, so understanding what those cosmic and universal laws underneath that make you successful. And so I didn't really have that problem. And I was always kind of building a personality where a lot of guys just got laid because they were stripping. And if they didn't, if they weren't stripping, if it wasn't a strip venue, they didn't know how to approach.
They didn't have the confidence.
Yeah, but like we said, everything is relevant. Mm-hmm. So if you understand the dynamics, you can just reapply the dynamics in any social situation.
So like what you're really saying is basically, let's say you're in a new social situation where the highest status is not placed on the
being
best
naked.
stripper.
Yeah.
You figure out where the status is being placed, and you not necessarily fake your way into that, but you figure out what parts of you could claim that status.
Right, yeah. Well, yeah. And I think what I've come as I've gotten older, my conclusion is authenticity, integrity, authenticity, and empathy are the three things that supersede everything else.
What's the difference between integrity and authenticity?
That I am who I am. And I say who I am, and I am who I am, and I act in that manner as I make these declarations about who I am. Integrity is that I keep my word, that I'm truthful and I'm honest. And I guess it's connected, but I think there's a little slight connotation, different content. And the empathy is to understand how other people feel, how in a certain social situation, say, this is what this person is going through, which doesn't necessarily, it doesn't negate their wrongdoing, but understanding it helps you understand and helps you grow as a person to have that empathy because you're living their life through their eyes.
And so you do this for 10 years, and obviously now you have huge experience as a performer on stage.
Yeah.
And you start getting into...
Well, what I did was I started hiring comics like Tracy Morgan, Mike Epps to open my shows. This was before they were famous.
So you were the famous male stripper hiring Tracy Morgan to be like the feature while you were the closer.
They would open. They would open, tell jokes, and then we would start the show.
Yeah.
So it was a little, but it was really because I enjoyed comedy so much. Like I said, I was a guy who in elementary school I would sneak home and listen to my father's Richard Pryor and Red Fox albums. I was a kid, after bedtime I would sneak up and watch Johnny Carson and watch the comic on Johnny Carson. So I always had that interest in it. And then I kind of brought that as another element of the stripping. So I always wanted to do it. And I always kind of wrote stuff down, but I was so entrenched in the stripper world, I didn't think anybody would take me serious as a comic. I figured they would go, oh, shut up and take your clothes off. So I never really embarked on it until 2000. 2000 is when I first started.
How old were you then?
I don't know, like 34 or something like that.
So what is it? You start going to open mics? You started going up on stage?
Well, I have a process in which I learned. The first thing I did was I went on Amazon and I bought every book that I could possibly which is funny because that's what I've been doing with Bitcoin now. And since I met you, I've been absorbing everything. So I think, okay, so...
Do we have the book Choose Yourself here? We should get Dante Choose Yourself. It's like my Bitcoin's 1/100th of what I do. It's just Choose Yourself's a good book. You would like it.
Thank you, Steve. You're always a pleasure. Shut up. I'm trying. I was going to say something.
So you I asked you if you're going on open mics. If you started buying every book.
So I bought every book and I read every book that I could possibly read on. So let me go back a little bit. I went to SUNY New Paltz, but I went on a fencing scholarship. And the reason why I went on a fencing scholarship, my father knew a guy who was supposed to go to the Olympics. I'm not sure what year, but he popped his Achilles heel in fencing. And he ended up taking a civil service job with the Parks Department. My father worked for the Parks Department, and this guy was teaching inner city kids how to fence. And my father asked me if I wanted to do it, and I was like, yeah, let's give it a shot. Sword fighting, I'm in, right? And I got really good at it. But the reason why I got my instructor was an amazing instructor in that. So for the first 6 months of me learning how to fence, all I did, he never even put a weapon in my hand. He would just go advance, retreat, advance, retreat, advance. I would just learn the fundamentals of the footwork. Then he would go lunge and then recover. Lance, 6 months I did that. And I think I was like 11 or something like that. I was like, when do I pick up the sword? And they wouldn't let me do it. Then he finally put a sword he put the foil. I fenced foil. He put the weapon in my hand. And then I was like, okay, now we're going to, and he was like, no, extend, recover, extend. And so from my fencing, my fencing history, I learned that having strong fundamentals is everything.
So learning what the different micro skills were.
Right.
So for instance, with fencing, it was like, how do you advance and move back? That's one skill.
Right. Footwork is important.
And then when you had the sword or the foil, how you extend and
Retreat and parry and stuff like that.
So there's all these micro skills that are independent of each other that you have to learn. And it's the same thing in many skills. But
if you learn those in excess where you have that muscle memory, when you put them together, it's much easier to integrate them. There's still a learning curve even to integrating them, because as soon as you start walking and
first
attacking,
it's in your head rather as opposed to.
But you have that muscle memory because your fundamentals are so strong. And so that was a lesson that I learned very early on. And so my patience, I realized that I was very impatient at that time. But once I started actually fencing, I was better than guys who were many years ahead of me because my fundamentals were so strong. And I ended up getting a scholarship. I got a partial scholarship to SUNY New Paltz for fencing.
That's great.
So
with comedy, what did you see? You started buying a lot of books, but what did you see as the initial micro skills you needed to learn?
So first, fundamentally, there's different kinds of jokes. Double entendres, misdirections, lists, they're all different kinds of jokes that you learn. And then when you learn all of those jokes, it teaches you the fundamentals of comedy writing, how to write a joke, this, that. Then there was, some books actually taught fundamentals of handling a mic, little things like not moving, shaking the mic, not, moving the mic stand away so people can see you, and all of those. But it's just like anything else, just like a Picasso. Once you learn all the things, then you throw away and you do, you have the ability to do whatever you want to do because you have the poetic license to do whatever you want. But you need to learn those fundamentals. And what I find is most comics don't understand the fundamentals of comedy in the first place. And they'll constantly be doing new bits. Whereas if you have a 5 or 7 minute set, and you just work that set until you're bored of it, you will start to explore these kind of esoteric elements or these nuanced things about comedy that you wouldn't normally get if you're doing new material. You know what I mean? The analogy I use is try to put a light bulb in a socket on a broken ladder, on ice, on a dolly, because everything is moving at different, so there's no stability. Whereas if the foundation is sound, if you understand different types of jokes and the structure, the technical structure, because I also was I'm a pretty scary guy to people who don't know me, at first glance. And so I didn't think that people would laugh at me because I'm not a guy that genuinely people laugh at. So I felt like I wanted the technical structure of my jokes to be impeccable.
So describe, I don't know, like a lot of, it sort of reminds me of poker a little bit, and I'll tell you why. A lot of people, just the average person off the street, you ask them, hey, are you good at poker? Almost everyone says yes, because they don't realize there's actually like a hard skill there.
Sure.
And same thing with stand-up comedy. People are like, oh yeah, I make my friends laugh, like at the dinner table. I make my family laugh, so I must be able to tell a good joke. But when you talk about the technical structure of writing and telling a joke, it's very different from telling a joke to your friends.
Sure.
How would you describe that difference? Like maybe give like an example or something.
So when you're making your friends laugh, you all have experiences and you have a prerequisite of your lives that you've spent together. And so there's things that are funny to you because you have the experience. You have a foundation that you're all a commonality in that foundation.
Kind of like an internal group language that only you guys speak.
Absolutely. So it's funny. So all you really got to do is get the punchline. So now when you're doing a set in front of a crowd, you got people from Denmark, people from the Bronx, people from Idaho, some people from Florida, some people from Wales and Scotland, and
none of them know you.
None of them know you, but they also don't have this kind of group mentality either. This inner language. The references of their life is different, and so you have to bring them together on an even plane first, and have them all understanding what you're talking about before you do the punchline. So, if you look at comedy, a mathematical representation of a misdirection joke is 2, 4, 6, 37. That's the joke. The punchline is the absurd at the end. But you have to first get the person to think in 2, 4, 6, and then when you're thinking 8, I go 37.
And they're all, whether they're from Denmark or Texas, they're all thinking 8 by the time you get to 6.
Right. Now, the better comics can go 2, 4, 37 because you only need 2 mathematical expressions to get people thinking in the same direction. So that means you have to explain the joke in as briefly as possible to hit the punchline. And so audiences, like, people are innately selfish. So because we are all bags of need, you know. We're cold, we want to get warm. We're hungry, we want food. We want companionship. We want whatever. That's if you think about it, every second of our life, we're satisfying these needs. So we're selfish in nature, you know, just as organisms. So when you're talking to somebody, they don't care about what you're talking about. You have to make them care. But the more attention they give you, the bigger the payoff has to be. So it's kind of like a slot machine. So if you throw 1 quarter in a slot machine, you hit it and you hit the jackpot. Even if you hit it for just $25, there's more joy than sitting at a slot machine for 6 hours, putting 400 in, right, and gaining $1,000, because the investment is higher, so the payoff needs to be higher. So the smaller the investment, the more elation, the more people. So
that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. So what's a case where you learned early on, okay, here's a joke, and people are laughing, but not as much, but then you trimmed some of the words and you got higher laughs?
Well, I kind of, before I started doing it, I had an understanding of this. Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you my first joke ever. My first joke was
for a crowd.
For my first joke, my first 2 jokes was this. I've never, I never had many. So first of all, I'm a big scary guy, and I was like, I never had many friends, mostly just hostages. That was,
that's funny.
It can't get any leaner than that. I was close with my dad. We used to play dodge brick, right? You can't, that setup and punchline, it doesn't really get any leaner than that, you know? So I had an understanding of the economy of words and the fact that the emotional investment, the payoff the quicker you pay them off, the better off you are. So I understood that. And I also, we were talking about the audience manipulating you into a rhythm. So it's Pavlovian. So what happens is you end up, you're manipulating your audience into laughter, but when they give you the laughter, unbeknownst to you, you start to program yourself into certain rhythms and tones. So,
which could be a bad thing.
Oh, it is a bad thing, but it's necessary in terms of your progression. If you're going to move beyond that. So, for instance, you start to talk in a rhythm. You start to write in a rhythm. All your jokes start to have a rhythm. And if you think about it, because I know you're like me and very analytical. If you think of any comic that you can think of, they have a rhythm. There's a rhythm. So like if you're in the next room and you can't hear the words, but you hear the murmuring of their comedy, you can tell who's on stage by the murmuring. And remember, like for instance, Attell will be like, he does that kind of
right.
But you get to know his rhythm. Now the problem, if the joke is, the punchline is the surprise, and you know the rhythm, the funny dissipates as I can anticipate the rhythm.
It's so interesting because that's sort of why, in Steve Martin's book, Born Standing Up, he sort of suggests that that's why he quit stand-up ultimately, because he spent 12 years developing one rhythm, and he would be filling football stadiums and they would all shout the punchline before he could get to it.
Right.
And he was like, what am I going to do now? I'm not going to spend 12 years developing a new rhythm. So he stopped doing stand-up completely.
Or you develop a style that doesn't have a rhythm. That's that's the disconnect. So it becomes dun, 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 and everybody goes dun, dun. Now, you may not know what the exact punchline, but you know the punchline is coming. And it's not as funny because you know the punchline is coming. So if you watch me, what I've learned is, so I'm confusing that rhythm. Initially, I used to confuse the rhythm because the pattern, like if it was a number pattern, the string of numbers would be so long that you couldn't it was difficult to figure out the pattern. And by the time you figured out the pattern, I was already off the stage. But then I've learned that stream of consciousness itself doesn't have a rhythm. So if I'm on stage and a girl walks by and she's hot and I pause, that pause has no rhythm to it. It happens in real time. It's real stream of consciousness. And if I'm having a real like we're having a conversation, there's no rhythm in the conversation because we're engaging, we're interacting on a human way right in this moment. So to take that and take it on the stage makes you in bulletproof to nobody can ever get a beat on your rhythm. So even when you do a bit, like if you notice, I'll do a bit and there's things that I will do that are similar, but it's always kind of has a different, I won't always word it the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen you perform a lot now, and I remember the very first time, and I've always thought each one was hilarious. I've never seen you bomb.
Right.
And the very first time, I thought you were all crowd work, and it was all hilarious. Now I know there's a lot more structure in it, that you have the spine and the crowd works around it.
Right.
One thing I would say is similar. You have a way of doing your voice that is very non-threatening. You're leaning, first off, you get as non-threatening as possible. You get on the chair, you lean back so that you're not like looming over them. Whereas like other comedians loom over them sometimes to get status, but you don't do that. You lean back.
Well, that's an awareness because I know that as soon as I walk on stage, my presence is so big that it sometimes can work against me.
But I would say like Godfrey is an example, great comedian, where he will loom over because he's doing the alpha status thing, and that's how he'll control the crowd. It's just a different style.
Yeah.
But you're making an active attempt to be non-threatening, and you'll even lower your voice. I don't know if I would say an octave, but like a few pitches.
Sure.
You'll be like, I don't think she knows what staffing is.
Right,
It's a little slower. It's a little lower.
Right.
No, I mean higher pitched.
Right.
So
when you really, so think of it as you're painting a picture and you have a palette of different colors, right? But those palettes, not colors, it's type of jokes, double entendre, lists, misdirection. But it's also tone is another set of colors. Characters is another set of colors. Crowd work is another set.
What's more? Give more. Like more micro skills. There's like 1,000 micro skills.
If you paint that picture and when you start to realize all that you have to use, then even when it's this, you're doing a set and you've seen stuff, there's always something different to it because there's always something special that I'm trying to give the audience on an organic level every time they come to see me. So I've had people that have come to see me 4 or 5 times and they go, I saw you before and this was, and then I'll react to what's going on. So something will happen and I'll react to that. And then that becomes a moment.
Again, like in comedy, what's so interesting is that's a skill you have to learn.
Sure.
Whereas let's say poker as a game or sales as a business, this is actually the same critical skill. Like if you get dealt a pair of aces, it's still, whether you win or not, still depends completely on what the other people were dealt and how they play.
Sure.
And in sales, you can't just give the same sales pitch from one company to the next because they have different needs. But I think most people don't realize that this is like an actual skill they need to learn, how to adapt situation by situation.
Well, Art of War, Sancta Son, it says that there's a quote from Art of War where they ask if you have a fort with 4 sides, right? And what should you do? Should you put equal troops on every side? Should you put more in the front as the troops are coming and on the side? And then, but the reality is your ability to mobilize the troops where their need is really what makes you successful. Your ability to mobilize troops as quickly as possible is what wins the war. And so you have to be so equipped with all these micro skills and know which micro skills you got to go to at the moment and it has to happen instantaneously.
So how do you learn that? And I guess that gets back to, so you bought all the books, you studied comedy, I guess you started going on stage somewhere.
Yeah.
And what happened? Like, how did you start to?
So I had a pretty tight set. The first, Laurie Kilmartin. You know,
Yeah.
Okay, Laurie Kilmartin was the first host. She hosted, I did a bringer show. We got to bring people. And she hosted. And
I've hosted with her.
Right. Okay. And I went on stage and she hosted and I went up and my jokes were razor sharp. They were very economical with words. And I was like, bang, 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 bang. And she was like, wow, how long you been doing that? I was like, this is my first show. And she was like, what? Like, how? Like, it's so tight. But it wasn't tight because I was extraordinary. I put the work in and I had done all the technical work first. So it was just, the geniuses of today stand on the shoulders of the geniuses of yesterday. You and I talked about the difference on my podcast, we talked about the difference between the person who looks at the world in terms of similarities and the person.
Right.
So learning to accept the system that there was plenty of comics before us. There were books that tell you how to do this. Now, it doesn't tell you the nuance, but why not start with that foundations? Why not start with that advanced, retreat, those basic fundamentals, and then build on that? And so it put me so far ahead of my class because I was already had the fundamentals down and I was practicing them. So I get on stage and I kill. And then I kill. I also knew that how people perceive me, and I was perceived as a kind of scary dude. And so I did a character. When I first started, I was doing a character. So I would get on stage and I would just pause almost 30 seconds, not say anything. And they would just look at me. I was bigger and muscular. My neck was huge. And then I would go, before I start, I just want to say it would be to everybody's advantage to laugh as much as possible. I'd say my psychiatrist says I have fits of violence, and it's brought on by a lack of acceptance. And that was my opening joke.
That's great.
And they would blow up.
So that was 18 years ago. Why don't you still do that?
Because that character, so I have a theory about characters. Anytime you see a character, right? So, for instance, the theory goes, okay, if you look at Bart Simpson's been on TV, 20 years? Maybe more?
29.
29 years, okay. But he's still 9 years old.
Yeah.
Why? Why is he still 9 years old? I mean, he's 9 years old because he's a cartoon, but he's 9 years old because he only ages a half hour at a time. So even though it's 29 years, he only matures in the episode. That's his age. When you're not watching him on the episode, he's not maturing. He's not 9 years old. So it's 9 years and a half hour. The first episode 1, he was 9 years and a half hour. So what you find with comics that do a character, they only age on stage. So they're not talking about so when they're off stage, you're still living and you're still growing and you're maturing. So now you're stuck doing these juvenile jokes that you did because you're in the character, you're not in yourself. And so I knew that I had a daughter and I wanted to talk about a daughter. I was married at the time. I wanted to talk about that. But that guy who was on stage was this ex-con who scared people, and he didn't have those things. He didn't have a daughter.
It's so funny because I, of course, have been grappling with this exact arc. Like, I feel I have led a very complicated and interesting life that I want to be able to talk about. But my very first joke, which was a hack joke, an easy laugh, was I've had a bad day. Even right outside, some woman just said to me, "Look, there's ugly Harry Potter." And because I look like Harry Potter.
Right.
So, and then the audience would laugh. But it was like a hack, stupid joke that had nothing to do with my life.
Right.
And so I've been gradually getting more and more into telling truths about my life. But that's hard.
But
as opposed to
that's the path. And I don't mean to like shit on any other comic, but I'll give you an example.
Are you about to shit on me?
No. So when I watched Jim Gaffigan as a young comic, I was amazed. Like I would watch him come here in this club, and I would watch him do 15 minutes on bread, just pull it and just do, and I was just amazed, right? And then as I became a comic who was on that path, the path that you want to go to, where there's an authenticity, it started to annoy me that he was talking about bread. So I'll give you an example. I was at Gotham, and George Wallace came in, Jerry Seinfeld, and I was supposed to close, and they all came in before me, right? And so now I got to close behind these monsters, right? And which I don't care, because it's, we're talking about boxing. There's always the guy in the corner of the gym that's beating the piss out of the bag, and nobody wants to give him a fight because they don't want to get beat, because they know, because there's a reality. And I always felt like I was that dude that was the beast that nobody. I mean, I use a different analogy. I go, I have a bag of uncut cocaine in my fucking basement, and nobody knows I have it. But when I start getting the samples out, everybody's gonna get it. But I mean, that comes from anyway, whatever.
Comes from your past. We'll get there.
But so Gaffigan is working on a new bit.
Wait. So Seinfeld, George Wallace, everybody comes in.
Right. They all come in and they go on before me, and I have to close behind them, right? And everybody's like, oof, oof. But I'm like, I have a rougher time closing behind Godfrey than closing behind, because Godfrey is another one of those gym beasts, who hasn't really gotten what he deserves yet, because he's strong and just, hasn't gotten the break that he needs. So I go on after them. But here was the point. Gaffigan goes up. Now, Gaffigan his wife almost died. She had a tumor, and she had cancer, and she had a huge tumor in her head. They had to take
And this is recently?
Recently, yeah. And Gaffigan has 5 children. And so Gaffigan is able to do his life because of this woman who takes care of his kids and takes care of his home.
I haven't seen his act since then, actually. Like,
Well, he's talking about it, but he was working on his bit, and the bit is kind of like, he goes, "Oh, my wife almost died of cancer. And I went in, and the doctor said, he goes, oh yeah, she has a tumor. She has a brain tumor, and it's the size of a pear." And he goes, the joke is, it's almost like the doctor looked at me and goes, "This guy's not going to get millimeters," right? Which is a funny joke,
yeah,
right? But
plus ties into his whole like stupidity around his food choices and so on.
But here's the thing. What I want to hear about is the fact that he thought that his wife might die, and he has 5 children that she has basically been his rock. And what was his feeling when he thought that she might be dead and he might have to take control of this whole family without her? To me, that's where the funny is.
So I agree with you, and I agree that that's the goal. And I think some comedians get to that goal and some don't. But it's really hard because so much, like let's say on a joke, 5 things go through your head. There's a premise, then there's a punchline, there's how to connect them. But like on something like that, 1,000 things are going through his head, and he has to kind of tie them together and figure out how to make this sad thing funny, or this thing that's been complicated in his life, how to make it 3 words and funny.
Right.
That's
yeah,
so
but
hard.
we're also talking about somebody who's been doing it over 20 years.
Yeah, so you're saying he should have been able to go in that direction.
He definitely has the skill set to do that.
So what's the worst thing that's happened to you in the past 18 years that you then right away, as fast as possible, turned it into a joke?
I almost died last year.
Okay, so what happened?
So you want me to tell you a joke, or you want me to tell you what happened?
First time what happened.
All right, so what happened was I was on a blacklist, and I ripped I did a stunt and I ripped my quads, 2 of my 4 quads. And I went in for a surgery. And the surgery was supposed to be a simple surgery. They cut my leg open, and they reattached the quads. I didn't know I had sleep apnea. And the anesthesia, I stopped breathing. And because I had the anesthesia, the sleep apnea didn't respond to me stop breathing, and so I wasn't breathing. And they had to intubate me, took tubes and shoved the tubes down my throat, and they had to resuscitate me. And then for 3 days, I was in the ICU with a tube down my throat, tied to the gurney, and they wouldn't give me any anesthesia because that's the thing that stopped me from breathing. And for 3 days, I gagged until I was exhausted, fell asleep, woke up, had the tube down, and gagged again until I felt exhausted. And this just kept going 3 days straight. I literally watched the clock. I was fully awake the whole time, except when I became so exhausted I fell asleep.
Okay, now tell that as a joke.
So the joke is
I don't mean to put you joke on demand, but it's interesting
but
now.
The joke was I died early this year. I ripped 2 of my 4 quads. I didn't even know I had 4 quads, right? When you think of quad, you don't think of quad. All right, whatever, I'm an idiot. And then I have sleep apnea. I didn't know what sleep apnea was. So if you don't know what sleep apnea is, you go to sleep and your body goes, hey, I don't know if you heard, but you're not breathing. Wake the fuck up. And then you go, it's great when you have a wife or a girlfriend because she watches you die over and over and over all night. It's great for her. So went in for the surgery, and my body was like, hey, I don't know if you heard, but you're not breathing. And the anesthesia was like, don't worry. You don't have to breathe. It's fine. So now I'm not breathing. The doctor sees that I'm not breathing, and he intubates me, takes this tube, shoves it down my throat. I start gagging. I'm like, right? The tendency is to rip the tube out of your throat. So they have to tie you to the gurney. So I'm tied to the gurney. Tube is down my throat. I'm gagging. I'm like, this is going on for 3 days. I'm just watching the clock, gagging until I sleep, wake and sleep and wake and sleep. I'm gagging all the time. And I'm gagging. This is going on over and over. 3 days, I'm gagging. And the whole time I'm thinking, man, you ladies in your blowjobs, you are amazing. How do you do that? I didn't even know it was this hard. It changed me as a person. I used to push my girl's head down. I don't do that anymore because that's disrespectful. So I went through I almost died this year, and I wish I had learned something profound, like a road less traveled. And the only thing I learned was that I can't suck dick. So that's the joke. But it's not far from what the actual story is.
Right. You basically threw in some classic types of punchlines, and that made a real story.
I actually thought that while I was choking, I was like, why would a girl ever blow a dude? Like, this is horrible. That was actually, the joke came from me actually thinking that this is horrible. Like, why do this? You know? And so the joke, so I think you get to the point where you don't really have to go that far from what the truth is because it's interesting in itself.
Right.
But when you're a comic and you're trying to figure out, you want to be funny, you think that you have to add all this other stuff, classic punchlines and lists and the rule of 3 and K sounds and all these things that you learn. But you learn that it's the human condition is universal. Even people in Sweden and Denmark and the Bronx, everybody is still human beings. That's the human condition. And if you just learn to say it the way it happened and you're authentic and truthful, people will laugh at it because they get it. Like when I'm telling the story about how I'm choking, and you could see the pain.
But also you're doing, as opposed to when you're just describing what happened to you, when you're describing it as a joke, you're doing a little bit of an act out.
Sure.
Right? Like you're doing the gagging
sound. Because I'm sucking you in. I want you to feel what I was feeling in that moment.
Right.
So the act out is to pull you in. But if you think about it, the story that it ain't really that far off.
No.
From what the story really was, you know.
So now you're on stage a year, 2 years. When do you start feeling like, okay, hey, this is happening for me?
As far as what? Industry-wise or
Yeah,
just
industry-wise or your
Still not
confidence as a
happening for me.
comic?
It's
Or
still not happening for me.
but it has. I mean, you've been in a lot of you've been all over the place. You've performed all around.
Yeah,
You've
yeah.
been in shows. When did you start feeling the confidence as a comic? When did you start kind of consistently just like destroying the room? Like I've seen you destroy the room, like everyone's just
Yeah, yeah.
belly laughing.
Well,
Which, by the way, not every comic does. Even the
No.
best comics out there,
Yeah.
they don't get the belly laughs that you get, which is also an interesting thing too. I want to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I always did that. Like even when I was doing the character, because I had a real sense of who I was as a person, and I knew how people perceived me. So if you know how people perceive it, so the minute I walk on stage, people make assumptions about me. Those assumptions are the setup to the joke. So sometimes I don't even have to set the joke up. I just got to say the punchline. So if I go, why is the bouncer on stage telling a joke? As soon as I walk on stage, that's what they think. So me understanding how they perceive me is the setup, because I'm almost reading their mind, which is a scary thing because you don't always want to know what people think of you. I mean, what if they don't think good things about you? In a lot of cases, people don't think good. So you got to have the confidence to understand what they think about you and be okay with that, which is kind of the self-exploration. I mean, that's why I think comedy is such a special thing, because you don't really get funny until you know what people think of you, and looking in that mirror is a scary thing sometimes.
But let's take Jim Gaffigan. It's such a great example because he does fill Madison Square Garden.
Sure.
His shows do great. Everything he's performed in front of the Pope, like because he's considered like the ultimate clean comic. And let's take the bread situation. He tells 15 minutes of jokes about bread. It's because part of how he sees people perceive him as somebody who eats a lot and eats unhealthy.
Right.
And also, he looks like the classic cliche of a white bread kind of human. So he can relate that to the word bread.
Sure.
And then that's how he thinks. That's how he feels he's being authentic as opposed to going deeper. But maybe he's afraid, or I shouldn't say that.
He absolutely is afraid. I mean,
You think?
I wouldn't. I don't know that he's never told me that, but that's always why somebody doesn't dig deeper. It's the fear of being exposed. It's the fear of not being accepted. It's the fear of.
Whereas I feel like Chris Rock, like whatever's going on in his life that year, like he just got divorced recently, he'll go deeper.
Yeah, but also his persona that you can't that actually, if you know that historically, Martin Lawrence and him, he had broke before Martin Lawrence, and Martin Lawrence broke after him, but Martin Lawrence was on the come up. And he was opening for Martin Lawrence. And Martin Lawrence was kicking his ass on the road because Martin Lawrence, I think, is a funnier dude, like a naturally funnier dude. So there's people who understand comedy on a technical level, and there's people who are funny, just funny individuals. And not that one can't be better than the other, but the point is, if the guy who's naturally funny is also technically sound, just like any other sport or anything else, you're gonna surpass the guy who is technically sound and works hard. But if you're not working as hard, like I don't know anybody that works harder than Chris Rock at this. But so he created that persona, that rhythm, because Martin was kicking his ass on the road. Like he was burying him on the road. And so he created this persona to get people involved, to get this emotion from people more, which is interesting because now I think he's so much a better comic now, but he still holds on to that cadence. But the cadence is not real. Nobody can say that I have a cadence.
Yeah, it's interesting. And we've had this discussion where, like, if you look at Dave Chappelle, he has, like, in his last special that he did, at one point he's talking seriously to the audience about why he left Comedy Central that time. He had, like, a serious voice that was, like, one octave below his funny voice. It's almost like he uses his voice to signal to the audience when to laugh, which is kind of a cadence.
Yeah, it is. Attell absolutely has a cadence.
Attell definitely does.
Right.
But
you were saying Chappelle.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Chappelle is actually, like his last few specials, it's so close to his real voice now. Like
Except
think
that one scene at the end. I don't know if you saw the
when
very
he talks
last
about the
special.
Iceberg Slim.
Is that where he talks about Iceberg Slim?
Yeah.
Or when's he using the serious voice? When he's talking about how he left Comedy Central, right?
Yeah, it's the Iceberg Slim
Yeah.
thing, which is really deep, which is actually just deep. It's not even
Right, and he's using his serious voice
Yeah,
then. He's not using his like higher octave funny voice.
Well, I think you don't always have to be funny. You can also be, so another, micro skill is just being interesting.
Right. I think Dave Chappelle is almost more interesting than funny, even though he started out 25 years ago as a teenage comic.
Yeah, well, he's probably 30 because he started when he was 16.
Yeah.
So he's probably 30 years and like 30 something. But I think you become interesting and poignant, and funny is part of being interesting and poignant, but it's not the only thing. I mean, I've had situations where I've headlined, well, like if you watch me do an hour, you create a relationship with the audience. So there's a difference in the time frame of comedy, meaning, so I'll give you an example. Charlie Murphy, God bless the dead, rest in peace, good friend of mine. But Charlie was famous when he started doing comedy. And so he could, because he was famous, he could go on stage and he could bomb for 35 minutes. And I totally respect the fact that
why was he famous? He was a actor? Or?
Charlie Murphy's, Eddie Murphy's brother.
Okay.
But he was on the Dave Chappelle show, and that blew him up really famous. And then he started doing comedy after the Dave Chappelle show. He didn't start till then.
So the audience knew him.
They knew him already, and the clubs knew him, and so he had that kind of entertainment capital that he could sell. So he could go walk in any comedy club, and they would put him up, and he would do bomb for 35 minutes, which I don't even think I could. Like, I don't even know if I got those kind of balls. So he had huge balls, but I don't think he ever learned the economy of words because he didn't have to. See, when you're a comic and nobody knows who you are, you're fighting to get 5 minutes.
Right.
So you don't get 7 minutes until the 5 minutes are funny. And then you don't get the 10 minutes till the 7 minutes is funny. Then you don't get 12 minutes till the 10 is funny, and so on and so forth. So you learn the economy of words because you're not famous. Whereas when you're famous, you can go on stage and bomb for 35 minutes, right? And it's fine because your fame allows you to do that,
I guess I've seen Seinfeld or maybe Judd Apatow talk about this. Like, even Seinfeld says his fame really only buys him 30 seconds or a minute, but maybe that's not true. Maybe he's just saying that to kind of...
There's a definite... I look, in New York, absolutely, because New York is skeptical, but there's still this guy's famous.
Yeah.
And so there's also a level of comfort that he has because he's famous and he's accomplished.
We talked about this a little on your podcast, and this is what you were referring to earlier about, sometimes you learn from the similarities and sometimes you learn from the differences. So I've done public speaking for 20 years.
Right.
And when I speak to an audience, they all know who I am.
Right.
And they're all there for me. Sometimes they've paid to see me. And so I can basically do anything and I'll make them laugh. And I don't need economy of words. I can tell a story and they'll laugh. And then I've always been trying to figure out, since starting the comedy, how to take that magic that I feel I do in public speaking and bring it into comedy.
Right.
But it's very hard because
the
audience doesn't know me.
Right.
So I have to spend some time getting them to know me. And then I don't know how to take those things that make them laugh in public speaking. I don't know how to, I've been doing them so long in public speaking. I don't know how to trim the fat on them in comedy.
Right. And
so, but I look at the similarities though. I've been a communicator for more than 10,000 hours, but not a comedian for those 10,000 hours.
Well, it's a different objective. There's a different objective. So
although both are forms of communication.
Right, but the objective, so when you do stand-up, you're looking for laughs every 7 to 11 seconds. That's, when you talk about that belly laugh, that's what that is. It's bong, 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 bong. And even when you're telling a story that's a little more extensive, you're still expected to make them laugh as you're getting to the point.
Like, let's take I don't know how much you've listened to Gary Goldman's stuff.
Yeah.
But he'll tell like a 5-minute story, but still it's every 15 seconds. There's a
11 to 15 seconds. He goes, when he does that, that thing about the abbreviations.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, Dottie."
Yeah.
You're so like little things like that get you to the point. So you're not. So the person is not going, oh, I've been listening to this, him droll on for the last 2 minutes for a punchline. This punchline better be great. But he's giving you punchlines. He's paying off.
Right.
He's paying you off the whole time. And so that's what's in. And I think that is, we talk about being in the context of being present, being authentic, having credibility, having empathy to know what the crowd is, what they're thinking. Like you're reading the room. You're so far ahead of them. So when I get on stage, I can pretty much look at somebody and go, okay, I get it. So I've had where I've had killing the whole room, and then there's one woman who is just staring at me, right? And I could feel that, and I'll go, audience, let me show you what the face of hatred looks like. You see this lady? She hates my guts, right? And I'll point her out. And now she has she has the focus of the whole audience, which is uncomfortable for her. But she was making me uncomfortable because okay, we're both going to be uncomfortable now.
And it also puts the audience on alert that you might call on them. So they're going to stand up a little taller and laugh a little more because they don't want you to call on them.
That's a technique that I do. I shoot a hostage when I walk on stage. So like, I don't go, everybody get down. I go, pow, everybody get down. And they're looking at the dead body and they're going, I guess we better get down,
All right, what's a way to just shoot a hostage randomly?
I will.
I have to go up tonight, so
I will make fun of somebody first thing I do when I walk on stage.
Fearlessly.
I go, look at this guy, boom, and I will sacrifice him, especially if the audience, so if you have comics who are younger comics who are not really, killing.
Right.
The audience, so here's the dynamic. They start to feel confident that they cannot laugh, that they're judging. Oh, let's judge. Let's see. Then bring me another comic.
Right.
What's the next? So when I walk on stage, they think they're gonna judge me. I go, pow! I shoot a hostage, and they go, oh wait, what? We were in charge. No, we're not in charge.
No, I think that's a critical micro skill is taking. Not only being likable quickly, but taking control very quickly.
Yeah.
So what's the way? But shooting hostage might make you unlikable if the audience might go, oh, he just killed that guy.
It's got to be initially. So okay, I give you. Here's another example. When I was a kid, I was a pretty wild kid. Like I used to fight in the street and stuff.
Really, you?
5 different. Yeah, really, right? On 5 different occasions, I fought guys who pulled guns on me. About 4 or 5 different occasions, right? Now, here's the dynamic of a guy who pulls a gun on you. And he goes, aha, now I got you. Now, if he's close enough to me, right, I would step in the range of the gun, step closer to him in the range, and now the gun is on the outside of my body. So in order for him to shoot me, he would have to bring it back, but I'm holding the gun out of the range. Now, what is the mentality of him when he feels that he has the drop on me? I step in and then grab the gun. What is the aha goes to, oh shit. The advantage that I don't have anymore. So that was, but I learned that through martial arts and stuff. And so now he's so focused on regaining the advantage that he doesn't even he doesn't understand that he's vulnerable for any attacks, punches, kicks, elbows, whatever. And pretty much you could knock a dude out before because he's focused on that gun.
Right.
So when you shoot a hostage, you don't give them an opportunity to go, he's not likable. Everybody's running for the hills and they're going, everybody run. Nobody hates the Columbine kid. They're too busy surviving. So
at that moment,
right.
So like let's take a time when you've gone on stage, because I've seen you shoot the hostage, but not in the very beginning.
Right.
Usually you're like nobody expected to see the bouncer.
Right. Well, that is a way to go. Here's some little quick jokes that put you at ease. I'm funny.
Yeah.
So you could trust me. I'm gonna drive. Trust me, I'm funny. And they go, he made me laugh. Okay. And you gain their trust. But if the audience is rough, then I shoot a hostage.
Like, what's an example?
Of what do you mean?
Where you shoot a hostage?
I was in King of Prussia Mall there's a place called the Vault, and I walked on, and the crowd was really rough because the two comics before had a rough time, and I go, look at this guy right here. He looks like he has racist hair, right? I don't even know what that means. I go, he has racist hair. I go, sir, you're looking at me like you want to buy me, right? And that just, and they're like, well, I don't know. I'm not racist. I'm not. And then the audience laughs, and they're happy that it's him and not them. So they'd rather be on my side than they'll desert him. You know, I had a thing. It's the same technique. I remember I was doing a strip show in East New York and Brooklyn, and it was in the projects. And I came out, I did the show, and it was a bunch of girls, maybe 40 or 50 girls at this show in the community center. And I come out, and all their boyfriends are outside. And so
crowd.
Rough. They're all outside. They're mad at me. They don't even know me. And one of the guys goes, there go that stripper motherfucker. We should rob him. Now it's 40 of them. I can't fight 40 of them. So I go, why don't you rob me, you punk bitch? And now everybody goes, oh, what you gonna do? What are you gonna do, James? He just called you a punk bitch. Now, I could have called any one of them a punk bitch, but they don't want to deal with me because, this guy, he don't give a fuck. So their mentality is, okay, so I'm gonna put it on you, the guy who I spoke to. And he goes, yeah, whatever. I was like, yeah, that's what I thought. And then I go, that's your man? I go to his friends. That's your boy? You hang out with this punk motherfucker? Now the fight is not me against 40 guys. It's me against this guy. And the guys, his friends, they don't really want to try me either because they don't know what I'm capable of, you know? So singling out the person doesn't make the audience not like you. It makes them go their own self-preservation. Right. I don't want to be fucked with. So let him take him, you know? They'll sacrifice him.
There's probably a line though, like for instance, it's hard. You probably wouldn't shoot to kill a hostage who's a woman or a young girl.
I'll do that too. It depends, but she has to have been so annoying throughout the show that the minute I tell her to shut up, everybody goes, yeah.
But there's probably a line though somewhere where if you destroy that person, the audience is on that person's side versus your side.
If you hate dogs, and somebody's kicking a dog, you may allow that one or two kicks, but if he keeps kicking, you go, all right, look, stop kicking the fucking dog. You know what I mean?
Right. So you have to know where that line is.
You got to know where the line is. And how do you know that line? Is paying attention, reading the room, listening.
I mean, but you've been doing this for 18 years.
Yeah.
And you put in your 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
How would you, like, I'm not gonna put in my 18 years. I'm already 50 years old.
Yeah.
How would you skip the 10,000 hours? And I've been analytical, so I've been skipping as fast as I can.
Well, you have to reapply the things that you know about other things. That's what I say about true wisdom. It's reapplying the things that you already know and just trying to figure out where those things apply. So like I'm telling you a story about me almost getting gang jumped in East New York that relates to stand-up comedy, to me shooting a hostage, which is this, I mean, you understand the connection of that. So these were things that I learned when I was in my 20s, and I was just able to reapply them when it came to stand-up. But it's understanding what's relevant. So it's what's interesting is like interesting when I first met you, I just knew you as a comic, and I liked you when we spoke and kind of was good. But then when I found out that you were into the Bitcoin and stuff like that, and I started reading some of your stuff and then so in the last, Bill will tell you, I've like immersed myself in the whole culture of it, and I'm nowhere. But right now, right this moment, I could take somebody who is totally against Bitcoin and explain to them why they shouldn't they shouldn't be against.
Right. It's sort of your analogy with me. You know, you've been doing this for a year or two. You
Right.
know more than anyone in the audience.
Right. And you have and being an older guy and starting later, you have these other wisdoms that you can apply. These cosmic and universal laws that you just have to figure out how to apply it. The other thing I think that helps is having a mentor. Like, so the conversation that we're having, you're like the geniuses of yesterday stand on the shoulders of the genius today. So when you're picking my brain, that gets you there.
Are you calling yourself a genius?
Yeah, I'm pretty much a genius. When it comes to this shit, yeah.
I believe you.
Yeah. And it's not so much, I mean, I'm quite sure the people but I don't think there's not a lot of comics that would have this conversation.
Right.
That could even have this conversation about the theory of comedy like I have it.
But by the way, I agree with you. I think what a lot of beginning comics or beginning of anything miss out on is community with successful people in their area. I think that actually cuts out like half the 10,000 hours because you get to absorb all of these experiences. But a lot of, I think, comics don't start hanging out with, or let's say beginning anything, but I'll use comics as the main example because we're talking about that. But people starting out don't usually hang out with more experienced ones till they're in it for like 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
Yeah. But I was a dude who, when I started doing comedy, I mean, I was lucky because I had a car and I had a life before, right? So a lot of comics is, they're couch surfing and they're broke and stuff and they can't even buy a beer. I had a whole life before this. And so, like for instance, Judy Gold would come to this club and I would go, "You want to ride home?" And she would go, "Yeah, sure." And she'd get in the car and then we would talk and I would pick her brain. And I would, Godfrey and Patrice, and I would ask these questions because, so my system of learning anything is first find a mentor that you trust and let it be somebody who has achieved a certain level of respect in whatever you're doing, and then listen to them. Shut up and do everything that they say. Because that will get you, because first of all, if you respect the person who is the expert, right? They respect the fact that you're interested in what they do, that you respect what they do and you're interested in it. And so you can always get a mentor just by being polite and being genuinely interested.
And it's kind of like you did that in the very beginning when you bought books, which is like a virtual mentor.
Right.
As you're reading about everybody, then you watched a lot. And then, like you said, you started, talking to people like Patrice or Judy Gold or whoever.
Right.
And then, there's still something about like having actual stage time to get.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's the
you have to actually do.
You got to do. Mm-hmm. You can't just buy new Nikes and a headband and expect to be a ball player. You need to get out and work it out. But I think that you can skip a lot of it by by having a mentor and listening to what your mentor is. And I think that works in learning anything.
Yeah, I agree.
My sister is my older sister. She's a bitch, but she's really kind of an awful person, and. But she's educated, but she's dumb. Like, I don't know if you. So she told my nephew, well, everybody has to make their own mistakes, and that's not true. I mean, yeah, in a real sense, but no, you don't have to. If everybody had to make their own mistakes, you wouldn't.
We'd all think the world was flat to start with.
Right. You wouldn't. Well, how about this? Nobody invents algebra. You learn algebra from somebody who knows algebra. You don't have to create the mathematical construct of algebra. You get a book and you get a teacher and they teach you algebra.
I think I want to steal that concept here.
So why would that not work in everything else? And I'm not saying that we're going to, like, we're all fallible. We're all going to make mistakes. But the point is, those mistakes are going to come anyway. Why make mistakes that you don't have to make when all you got to do is listen to the mentor and say, when he goes, "Don't do that." Why not?
It's interesting because I guess it's like what Mike Tyson says, everyone's got a plan until they're punched in the face.
Yeah, right.
And like when you go on stage, or when a comedian goes on stage, it's like an instant being punched in the face because suddenly the audience is there.
Right.
Boom, right in your face.
But that's going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
But why not? But Mike Tyson had trained and he had learned he had taken shots in the face and he had knew how to hook and punch, built his power and his strength. And so he was ready, but he still had to get punched in the face. So the nuance of the mistakes and the nuance is coming anyway. Why would you subject yourself to the things that you don't have to subject yourself to? You could just, when it comes to investment and big, I'm going to listen to you. You the guy. You've clearly been proficient at it. So teach me, So teach me. And when I can't get you, I talk to Bill, and he'll, how inquisitive am I about this stuff?
That's good.
But it's that thing where you wanna like I wanna know.
Yeah.
I wanna know. I have and I wanna be good at it. Cause why wouldn't I not?
Well, first, I'll agree with you on comedy and on Bitcoin.
Right.
Let me switch gears. I want to ask you about relationships because you do podcasts and Jay, you gave the circle. Does anybody have a time limit? Do you have a time limit, Dante?
No, I'm good.
So a few more minutes. Okay. So, how come you're not? You give great advice about relationships. You have a podcast about relationships.
Yeah.
What are your relationships like?
My relationships are great. They're exactly what I want them to be.
And before we were talking, like I was mentioning to you, at some point I'm thinking of, I've been married twice. I'm thinking I'd like to get married again. I'm going to get engaged again at some point. And you said don't.
Well, I mean, it was kind of a joke. It
was funny, and they had good reasoning.
Right. I don't advocate not doing that. Look, I think that the nature of the social dynamics between men and women is that as a man, my ability to provide is attached to my manhood, right? So, and if you don't believe that, right, look at Kevin Federline. Right? So people talk about how Tiger Woods' wife got $50 million. And we, as men, we go, she never sunk a putt. She never, right? But Kevin Federline is the one guy that beat the system. He married Britney Spears, and he's basically living off her money. But nobody as a man nobody's walking around with Kevin Federline t-shirts, because how we as men define manhood is standing on your own 2 feet, keeping your word and providing for your family. And that's how we define it. Whether or not feminists that's how we define our manhood. And realistically, no woman is going to deal with a guy who doesn't have those qualities. They could talk about the equality of it and everything else, but
a lot of men are going to be scared listening to this, and a lot of women are going to disagree.
Yeah, you can, but here's the thing. No woman is going to the White Castle drive-thru and dating. No professional woman is dating that guy. But if I go through the drive-thru and there's a cutie and she's blinking at me, I'm going to take her out. And I don't care whether she's on the fries, because I don't need her resources. Mm-hmm. I like her because I think she's attractive. So if we define it as men, if we define our manhood as a man, our ability to provide and to protect and then you have to put your happiness first. Why? Because here's the thing, and women are gonna. I don't really care because it's just
We're just talking.
I'm never asking a woman relationship advice. Here's why: if you want to know how to hunt a deer, you don't ask the deer, you ask the hunter. Why? Because the hunter knows the behavior of the deer, and they know how to put a bullet in the deer, right? The deer is just being the deer, right? So when a woman starts to tell me, relationships, I want to know how many chicks you dated. How many women have you dated? How many relationships with women have you been? Oh, but I am a woman. Yeah, that's not the same thing. I've dealt with women. I know how women respond and how they act. Because look, I was a stripper. Here's the deal, and I'm not the best looking dude in the world, but the circumstances. So when I say what's your number? I ask dudes, what's your number? At 32, and I'm not bragging about this. I'm not even really proud of it. At 32 years, I kept a book of how many women I slept with. By the time I was 32, I had slept with 1,400 women.
You're like the Will Chamberlain.
Well, Will Chamberlain was like 10,000. But, and it wasn't because I was the best looking dude, but the stripper business women looked at you as an object. And because they saw you as an object, the agency of the ethical agency of what was the norm, they didn't feel that they had to be that way. So women could be freer with the strippers because they didn't think that you could judge them morally. So if they want you to pee on them, they'd ask you. If they wanted you to have sex with them in front of their husband, they would ask you. There was no agency of that. And so being in that position made women more available to you because they didn't feel like you could judge them ethically. And so I have so many women that I've been with, and there's patterns. So all women, and this piss everybody, but I always piss everybody over here. All women are alike. But let me say this. All men are alike too. That's why you have the study of behavioral psychology. Behavioral psychology is the study of patterns in behavior that human beings have. So men act the same way, but women act the same way. And everybody wants to seem as though they're so different, but they're not. I could rattle off 50 questions that every guy in here would agree with. Everybody in here has jerked off before? Everybody? Anybody not? Okay. Anybody here looked at porn? Everybody here looked at porn before, yes? Okay. Anybody ever felt afraid that they might get beat up before? We could rattle off question after question after question that's common to human beings, but you could do the same thing with women. The same thing, you could find those same patterns, and when you start to look at those patterns, you see how really not that women are less than, but that the fact that as we are as human beings, there's a commonality that we all have, which makes racism just so ridiculous, because we're so much alike, and to emphasize the differences, and to hate people for the differences is just absurd. So, as we see relationships and men's manhood is attached to their ability to provide, a man has to put his happiness first, because his happiness also encompasses her happiness. So you have a girlfriend, you don't feel like a man if your woman is unhappy. Like you feel like a failure, like you failed. I would go even further than that. I've taken girls out on dates to dinners, and they didn't enjoy the food, and I felt like I failed because I felt like I should have been more perceptive about what she likes. And that's just me, personally. Now, a woman's happiness is flighty in the fact that it's based on her emotional state at the time when she's talking. So what makes her happy right now could not make her happy in the next 5 minutes or the next day. So as a man, you have to, and this is what makes you attractive to women, is your ability to perceive what the things that make her happy before she says it. When you can do that, a woman will love you all the time. It's the fact that you know even when she hasn't said it. Now, we all go to therapy and people go, well, a man's not a mind reader and da-da-da-da, whatever we say. But the bottom line is, when you're a guy who's perceptive and you're paying attention and you're present, which is every woman wants a guy who's present. So one of the things I'll tell young dudes all the time, I go, if you're having sex, you should be present. If you're kissing a girl so you could grab a titty and grabbing a titty so you could take her pants off and doing that, so you're making a mistake. You have to be in the moment of the kiss. If you're present in that first kiss, just for the sake of that kiss, she can perceive that. She can perceive that you're not thirsty and you're not anxious, and she opens herself because there's almost a esoteric trust, because energy is exchanged. You're connected in an intimate way. So when women try to say that that's not the issue, But then you hear women all the time talk about spark. Yeah, I didn't feel the spark. You ever hear women go that?
To me, all the time.
Yeah, but but what is the spark? The spark is that I anticipated the food that you like. I anticipated the ambiance. I made sure I knew where the parking was. I made sure the car was gassed up. I made sure. So all of these things, all of this preparation that I took to make this date amazing somehow is spark. It ain't spark. It was planning. It was anticipation. It was work on my part.
So there's two directions we could go with this. One is we can get back to whether I should get engaged or not at some point. But I think I also want to take it back to comedy because you just said two things related to comedy. One is what you repeated earlier, which is being present, just like you're present with the woman. The guy should be present with the woman.
Absolutely.
The comic should be present with the audience.
Right.
Because they're going to recognize that rather than send some anxiety, which their X-ray vision is going to see that anxiety and reflect it back. And then the next part, the preparation, just because you prepare everything in the date, you still have to have the date and be present and be funny and the whole thing.
Right.
That's the same thing. You have to have the spine, you have to have the jokes,
Right.
and then you have to have all these other skills.
I can answer. Well, actually, I think there's a third way to look at this. So, number one, it's preparing for something that you don't know that you're preparing for, and being ready so that you can mobilize the troops wherever. It's that, right? But it's also being honest and authentic about what the situation is. Now, if you're gonna get married, you have to know. Like I go, I do a joke about engagement and how what a man has to do to get a woman, and I go through each step of it, and women get angry about it, but it's not true. And so one of the things I go is that so I have to give you an engagement ring. I go, does anybody know how much you're supposed to spend on the engagement, what the etiquette is? And somebody will yell out 3 months' salary, which is the answer, right? I mean, that was set up by De Beers, but that was the acceptable amount. Now I go, if I make $1,000, first of all, it's not the net, it's not the gross, it's the net. So if I make $1,000 a week, that's $12,000. And then I ask the audience, okay, ladies, what have you ever done worth $12,000? I go, I've never had a $12,000 blowjob. I go, I have had $1,210 blowjob. I prefer the latter. So this is not even a concept that a woman thinks about. She just wants the ring, and it feels good, and it's emotional, and he loves me. Look at the size of the ring. But it's $12,000, and that's not even you, because you 3 months of your gross is different than $1,000. So my point being is, this preparation is also knowing what you're getting into. Now, I say, if I'm a man, a credible dude, I know that I'm going to take care of my woman. I know she's going to be safe. I know she's going to have the ability to explore and be creative, because I want her to be happy and I want her to actualize her own personality, and I'm going to help her do that. And if she doesn't want me to help her do that, I'm going to stand back and let it do her own. If she asks me for guidance, I want to be able to have enough knowledge to guide her in a direction when she's uncertain, when she feels like she's insecure. I want to be there to be the safety net to catch her and to lift her up so that she knows that she can take chances because I've got her back. But let's be honest, all of that is a sacrifice on my part. So I don't mind making the sacrifice, but I'm going to sacrifice. I will make that sacrifice on my terms. So
what if she's only going to feel safe with you if you're, within the government confines of a, institutional marriage?
Then the question, you still got to put your happiness first, because you're going to take care of her anyway. So you're going to make sacrifices. So you better have something that's good for you. So if you do everything, so this whole scenario is happy wife, happy life. If happy wife, happy life mean nobody's happy, because she's going to be happy when you do what you do for what she wants you to do, until she wants you to do something else. When the mood changes and she wants you to do something. So you're, as a guy, you're chasing your tail, trying to chase this happiness that she perceives is her happiness. And I don't mean it like women don't understand, but I'm saying as their moods change, whatever.
Like anybody's mood change.
Right. Yeah, but here's the difference. Women tend to be very, like if you talk to any woman, she'll have 5 different sets of friends. She'll have friends that she'll go to the bar with, friends that she has at work, friends that she goes shopping with. Guys, we don't have that. We're not malleable. We are who we are. And even when we have a group of friends and the guy who's the dickhead in the friendship, he's the dickhead. And we just kind of accept him. He's Steve, you up? Yeah, good. But he's your boy, and he's annoying as fuck sometimes. But yeah, it's fine. You'll be fine. Go back to your phone. But I love Steve, but Steve is annoying sometimes. He's a lot. So, but we still can have him part of the crew, and he can still be who he is.
Right.
And that's okay. Women are very malleable. Women are very malleable in that I have a friend that I talk my relationships with. I have a friend that I don't talk my relationships. I have people that we're different animals in terms of socially we're different animals. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. So my point is, you know that being a man and getting married is a sacrifice. So I have a joke where I say, I want to get married. There's nothing more than I want than to make a committed decision on an emotional basis that reduces our love to a legal liability. That's what it is.
I'm telling you, we got to write a book, Comedy-nomics, like the the comedy of Freakonomics. It's a very Freakonomics way of valuing a relationship,
Sure.
but with a comedic perspective.
There's an honesty.
You could probably do that about relationships, work, parenting,
because everything
college.
is connected. Everything's connected. But if you think about that, you're going, she wants to be married and then you make this emotional decision. It's a binding commitment, but somehow it becomes a legal liability for you, because if it doesn't work, it is a legal liability, right?
Yeah.
You gotta
tell me.
So my point is, let's not be unrealistic about what this is financially just because I'm in love, because people fall out of love. Now, I don't mind taking that plunge, but I'm gonna do it on my terms. So I know what I'm getting into, and I can decide to do whatever I want if I want to do that. But let's not be unaware of the sacrifice that I'm making. So I dated a girl, and I was like, she paid for nothing, no meals, no nothing. I pick her up, drop her off. Never once in the course of 5 years of dating her did she ever put gas in my tank, and I didn't want her to. But it's still somebody put gas in the tank, right? And so here's the thing: if I left my dirty drawers on the bathroom floor, then shut up and pick it up. Like I'm doing everything. Now you want to nitpick about this? We're not doing that. How is that fair? Or how is it that you have a mood and I'm willing to help you, but you want to use me as an emotional punching bag instead of using me as a crutch to lean on? Because now you're upset and you're in an emotional place, and so you want to shit on me because you feel a certain type of way, and somehow that's okay. Any girl I've ever dated with, she goes, I know that at any given time you will leave me. And they've said that to me. And I go, you are right. I don't go, oh no. No matter how awful you treat me, I'll still be there. No. You won't stay for me at such time that your woman doesn't find you attractive or doesn't love you. She leaves with extreme prejudice.
Right. So even outside of that specific conversation, what you're really saying is also about authenticity.
True.
So when someone says something that you feel inside of you is not quite true, you're not going to say something just to please.
Right.
You're going to say what is the real truth for you. And if the conversation continues and the relationship continues in the given your authenticity,
right.
I think a lot of people have a hard time just saying, "Hey, I feel uncomfortable about what you just said." It doesn't really ring true to me.
Why don't they do that?
I would say because they're insecure that the girl or the guy or whatever won't like
Because
them if they're their true
they
selves.
don't feel that they have the value to be honest. So they distort, they lie because they don't want to be honest because they don't want to lose the person.
Right. So I think actually the key to success in relationships, and I think you agree, is that, and it's because it's related to comedy too, is that authenticity and that integrity. Saying what's like, if someone says something to me and I don't like it, I will say immediately, I don't know why, but I don't like what you just said.
Right.
And I think that's important. But I wasn't always like that.
Of course not.
I was always really insecure.
Right.
And it's only since saying that I've been happier.
And why wouldn't you? But there's two things that I say to guys when I go, if you feel a tingle in your nuts, chances are you're getting ready to get kicked in the balls. That's getting ready. So that feeling that you have is there for a reason. You feel that feeling and you should acknowledge it. That evolutionary, that's what we have. That's how I got a feeling. It's like your spidey sense. So, I had so I do consultations. I do one-on-one consultations through my website, DanteNero.com. You can click on consult and you can buy time with me. And I had a guy who asked me, I have this girl, I like her, been on dates with her. How do you tell somebody that her vagina smells? Which
he actually paid for you to tell him the answers to this.
Right. Well, first thing I said to him.
By the way, I hope you're doing comedy about this too. Do you ever bring this up on stage? Because it's fun. It's a funny premise.
Yeah, it is. This was just like 2 days ago. So I go, first of all, the reason why you're asking me is because you don't think that you have enough value to tell her. You think that her value is more important than you, so you won't tell her. I go, let me ask you something, and just be if your nether regions smelled like hot dog water and sewage, and a girl went to go open your pants up, she's gonna tell you. Why? Because she doesn't think you're doing her a favor by having sex with her. She thinks she's doing you the favor. So her value is higher, and so she's gonna, and she might not tell you, but she just may never see you again. So why would a guy hesitate going, hey, I really like you, but this smells like a garbage dump. You need to check this out. Now you should check it out, and why wouldn't you say that? So what are you supposed to just you go down with a clothespin on your nose? Like, why? Why would you subject yourself to that? And if you like them and they like you, we all have flaws. Wouldn't you want somebody to tell you your flaws? Like,
so it's interesting. Your answer is not a technique. Oh, here's how you tell her. Your answer is like how it's basically guiding this person to look at a bigger picture.
Sure.
Or to look at things instead of like, okay, here's a Q&A, and here's the question, here's the answer.
Right.
Look at the notes on the margins, and let's take a look at what's really happening here.
I want to teach you how to fish. Now, let's talk about the part of what is going on with a woman that her nether regions have an odor, and clearly she's sick, right? Because that's what happens with infections and whatever. What is it about? What does it say about her as personality that this is going on, and she's not aware of it?
By the way, this could happen in either direction, but yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But so you're talking about somebody who's unaware. You're talking about somebody who's clearly selfish. If she is aware, she's selfish because she's willing to subject you to this horror, right? Without even considering it. And then you're in a situation where you don't think that you're even worth to not be with a girl who's smells. Do you know what I'm saying? And there's a cockiness now if she has a cockiness about this, it's like, really? You cocky? Like you're better than me, but you smell? Like
so now have we heard back from the guy who called you?
Nah, yeah, this was like yesterday, day before yesterday.
So when do you hear back from him? You have to
I don't know.
you have to give me a call and tell me what happened.
I'll call you and let you know. But I mean, here's an example. If you got a kid and he doesn't make his bed, he probably is not going to pay his American Express bill. It's all relative. It's about responsibility. You make your bed, you do your homework, and then when you grow up to be a grown man, you pay your bills on time and you pay your credit card bills. if you don't do those things, you don't make your bed and you don't clean your room and you don't do your homework, you're probably going to be, that's a kid who at 8 years old, you already know he's going to be in debt. Why? Because he doesn't understand that there are consequences to his actions, and that responsibility and integrity is important.
That's a really good point. And I do actually now want to bring this back to comedy in order to we'll get into the final stage of this. But so I'm just going to completely segue without any.
Sure.
Where do you want to go next in comedy?
I'd like to be better known. Like, I'd like to do bigger things. I want to do an hour. I want to do an hour with Netflix or some. I want to put out an hour and have that go. I mean, I've been working on this craft for so long. I think I'm more than ready for people to see the development of where I'm at. And I don't really think that, I think that I have this really unique point of view.
Have you shot an hour?
Not yet, no.
Why don't we shoot you an hour of you downstairs and just film it? And then you can send it into Netflix.
Let's do it.
You can shoot it in like 4K and 3 cameras. What does Netflix require?
I'm not sure. I can find out, though. I can definitely find out when you do it. So that's industry-wise. I want to do more acting and stuff, bigger parts. But artistically, I'm already pushing myself artistically. Like, that's something I've always done. I'm always trying to push and go deeper and be honest, authentic, honesty. And I think, again, goes back to integrity, authenticity, and empathy. If you keep those 3 things in place, I think you can't not be successful. And I think even it cleanses all the evil around. Like, if you operate on a level of integrity and you never compromise that, and people can't deal with you in any other way, because you're just not going to tolerate it.
I think that's really true. And again, I think that's a real important meta skill for learning anything.
Yeah.
To figure out what your point of view is and to learn the skills around that point of view.
Sure.
With that, I'm going to close off the podcast. But Dante, how do people find you? Particularly if I want to call up and get some consultation on relationships.
Okay, so let me just say first, the podcast is the Beige Phillips Show, presents Man School, hosted by Dante Nero. My website is dantenero.com. You just click on consult and it's right there. You can book everything right online. I get an email telling me that you want a phone call at a certain amount of time. I call you up and we talk and you tell me what's wrong and I tell you what to do. So it's pretty easy. The problem is I find out men don't usually consult as often as possible because men, like, again, this is men's manhood is your ability to provide, and so guys don't ask for directions, and they only ask for directions when they're in the desert out of gas. So usually I get the call when the relationship is in shambles, and then they're looking to fix it after it's all screwed up. But you can just click on consult, or you can follow me on Instagram as Dante Nero Comedian. Everything else is Dante Nero. If you Google
and
me.
then they find your where you're going to appear on comedy, or
that's on my website as well.
And the podcast, of course, very funny. And
thank you. And you're on it. So
I'm on it. See you just a few weeks ago.
We had a really good time.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's awesome, man.
All right, well, thanks, Dante. And I want to, at some point, you'll come on again because I want you to analyze one of my sets. That was our original plan, but we brought you in today.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you as a friend, and I've learned so much about finances and stuff from you, and I
appreciate that.
You have an open invitation to call me, and as does Bill. I told Bill, not you, Steve.
Thanks so much.
I love Steve, though. Let me just say it. You got more wisdom than all of us. So
it's probably true. All right. Thanks again, Dante.
Thanks for having me, bro. Appreciate it.
Next time on The James Altucher Show.
I always wanted to be in charge of my own destiny. I thought this is what I was born to do,
You felt that. How did you feel that?
Because like my whole body, my whole spirit changes when I'm in the kitchen or when I'm at the farmer's market.
Do you think it's possible to get started in a field if you're a little too old and you can't have the time to learn the ABCs of your craft?
I really think it is important to learn the basics really well. But I think in these days, imagination is even more important.
You know, I just want to say thank you to everyone listening to this. Please take a moment to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or wherever it is you get your podcasts. It will only take a second, but it will help other people discover the podcast. And it will really show people in general that this is a quality show and that it's worth listening to. You can also check out the show notes at jamesaltucher.com/podcast. Also, if you want to get my blog updates and other updates that I do, sign up for the newsletter at jamesaltucher.com. Thanks again. I really appreciate you guys.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.